Folks, welcome back once more to Indaba, Africa. Or are you confused? I know I'm confused. On the eve of another meeting, yet one more meeting in the business rescue effort for failed state-owned enterprise parastatal South African Airways, scheduled to take place on Tuesday, July 14th of 2020, the South African Airways Pilots Association, SAPA, is raising concerns about the settlement and the plans going forward, particularly severance packages. Well, the two folks involved in the business rescue practice for South African Airways, that's Siviwe Dongwana and Les Madison, have proposed a plan which is running into some strong headwinds with the South African Airways Pilots Association, SAPA, as well as other creditors. But primarily, they're the ones in the news right now. Why are they upset? Well, and why do they get a vote? That's the first question. Why do the pilots get a vote, and what happens to the airline? Well, for the simple reason that South African Airways failed to pay them 13-month checks. So bonus checks were not paid to the pilots, which makes them, by default, a creditor. Now, South African Airways pilots are owed 103.3 million rand. That's 0.5%. 0.5% of the outstanding 16.4 billion rand that is owed to creditors. Now, these creditors will have to vote on the approval once again on the 14th of July. Pravin Gordhan's Department of Public Enterprises, which is responsible for this debacle, this mess, has called the pilots greedy and unreasonable. Now, I'd have to say that one has to take that with a grain of salt. In fact, one could call the African National Congress's government greedy and unreasonable. The entire process of destroying this airline, which has been a slow roll, painful episode, watching this state-owned carrier fail to take advantage of the fact that it was no longer restricted by apartheid bans and could now land anywhere in Africa, failing to see it take advantage of that over the last 2.5 decades, while others moved in and gobbled up those routes and grew exponentially, like Ethiopian, Kenya Airways, Brussels Airlines, which came out of 2 bankruptcies previously and emerged as a profitable company. Yet South African Airways has lumbered along and for a decade, nearly a full decade, has lost money. Now the company is essentially in receivership in bankruptcy proceedings, or as they call it, business rescue in South Africa. Don't you like that euphemism, business rescue? Yeah, right. Okay. So reorganized South African Airways, which is a minor carrier to begin with, ladies and gentlemen, just 39 aircraft when this nonsense started and they went into bankruptcy in December of 2019. 39 aircraft flying around the world. The revived airline is scheduled to have just 20 aircraft, and of those 20 aircraft, they'll only be flying 3 domestic routes within South Africa. Now, this is going to prove to be quite a severe problem for South African Airways' 9.7 million passengers that fly annually with the airline, both domestically and internationally. True, there are other airlines that can pick up the slack by moving into the South African market, assuming that they survive the current crisis. I'm talking about actors like Emirates, perhaps British Airways, Ethiopian certainly, and even smaller players might be able to move in and take a bit of the bite. But that's not the plan for the government. The government seeks to resuscitate this beast that has failed. Now, why has South African Airways failed? For a lot of reasons, primarily because of corruption and ineptitude and government interference as a result of patronage, placing ANC cadres in the corporate management, on the board, and leading this company into oblivion. Now, the pilots are upset. And why are they upset? Well, the pilots, there are 617 pilots for South African Airways represented by their union. And the newly reorganized airline is set to have just 88 pilots. Now, maybe that's why they're upset. But they're also upset about the separation, the voluntary separation packages that are being proposed as part of the settlement to unwind and resuscitate South African Airways. And it's quite complicated, folks. I'm not going to bore you to tears with that. It's very complicated. But bear in mind that the pilots, and I'm not criticizing the pilots at all, but because the airline foolishly failed to pay them their bonus check, they now have voting rights, and they can hold this thing up. With 0.5% of voting rights, the airline pilots can have a vote, a say in what happens as a creditor, despite the fact that they hold a very small percentage of the debt. Now, these confusing packages that are here, I'm not even going to try to read this to you because it's all over the place, what a pilot gets, what other workers get, but it is quite a crazy situation. It's really, really Bizarre, the packages. But the bottom line is it doesn't matter whether workers are retrenched, whether 435 workers see their working days reduced to just 12 per month, and 60% of their salary paid through a temporary layoff scheme. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you reduce the number of pilots. The reason South African Airways is unprofitable, the reason it's a disaster, the reason it's in bankruptcy is because of government interference in the enterprise. It is not permitted to operate as a business venture. It is a patronage machine. It is a vanity project for the ruling African National Congress, which seems to think that this is 1965 and not 2020, as it embarks on a path of socialist state control of the economy. One example, South African Airways. How many times must the African National Congress fail before they wake up and realize that their path is incorrect and South Africans are suffering as a consequence of their failed policies, their ineptitude, and their inability to run an economy? Let South African Airways go, let it fail, let it be reorganized, and let it come back as a private enterprise. Now, on top of this, some really bizarre news. I found a couple news sources reporting that among the aircraft, just so you know, folks, if you're from South Africa and you're wondering what's happening to South African Airways, this isn't being widely reported in the news. The business rescue practitioners, Siviwe Dongwana and Les Madison, are busy unwinding the company as we speak. Before these creditors meetings take place, they're busily doing this. Of course, that's their job. I'm not criticizing them. But just so that folks are aware of what's happening, on the 10th of July, it's reported that South African Airways disposed of 2 of its 4 A350 Airbus long-haul aircraft. Now, why is that important? Because the A350 is the newest aircraft in its livery, and it's very efficient, fuel efficient, cost-effective. This is an aircraft that was first put in service just in 2015 and is still in production. Now, on the 14th of July, tomorrow, when the creditors are supposed to meet, South African Airways is supposed to dispose of 6 of its 10 remaining A320s. Now, this is the flagship of the fleet at the moment. It's the A320, and they're getting rid of 6 of those. The next day, on the 15th of July, they are scheduled to dispose of all of their A330s, remove that from the inventory. So what does this leave South African Airways with? Well, ostensibly 20 planes, which I've mentioned, but for the long haul, which is the profitable routes international, normally for a profitable airline, this will leave South African Airways with just 6 A340s, which is a fuel pig and not particularly efficient. 6 A340s and 2 A350s, both of which I understand are under lease, I think from Air Mauritius. So not even sure what's going to happen to those. None of this bodes well for the future of South African Airways, ladies and gentlemen. The situation that the government of South Africa is sitting with 16.4 billion rand of debt, another $592 million needed just to get this airline through the next few months. That number has been reported all over the place, lots of different numbers. Whatever the figure is, a lot of money is needed to keep this airline on life support until the end of this year. The money doesn't exist. Where is it going to come from? Who knows? Breaking up the airline, selling off its assets, and paying off its debt is the best route, but that is not a route that the government of South Africa seeks to pursue. They are dismantling the airline to save their vanity project, their prestige project of South African Airways. A much reduced, far less useful airline to the people of South Africa is what will emerge. And how many pilots will this new airline have? 617? That's not going to happen. 88? That seems an unlikely figure as well. We shall see, ladies and gentlemen. More headaches from South African Airways as creditors are prepared to meet on the 14th of July. The Pilots Association not happy about the settlement. And there you have it. As the business rescue practitioners dispose of aircraft this week, much of the fleet for South African Airways disappears. So there'll be fewer options regardless of what decision is reached with the creditors after this week. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been my video on the current situation with South African Airways, a very confusing and frustrating situation for anyone who thinks cogently and cares about South Africa. If you're not a subscriber to my channel, I ask you to consider becoming a subscriber by smashing that subscription button right down there, and be sure to toggle that bell icon, which will notify you of my updates for my live streams, for my prepared videos, and also for any special features I have with guests that I usually have anytime during the week or my regularly scheduled Saturday live stream. Feel free to leave a comment. I try to read all comments. And finally, I ask that you smash the like button down there, because likes drive viewership. The more likes as a percentage of views, the more likely others will see the video. I thank you for your patronage. Take care, folks.